question is that these bills be now read a second time, and I call the honourable member for Dobell.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I welcome the reintroduction of the carbon tax repeal legislation, and so do the Australian people who have waited far too long to see the end of this jobs-destroying toxic tax. On the 7th of September 2013, the Australian people overwhelmingly elected a new government that was committed to stopping the boats, repairing Labor's debt and deficit disaster, building the infrastructure for the 21st century and, above all else, repealing Labor's carbon tax. The Australian people have good reason to be angry with the actions of the members opposite. Ever since the then Prime Minister Julia Gillard spoke these words before the 2010 federal election, there will be no carbon tax under a government I lead, Labor has deceived the Australian people. Again, before the 2013 federal election, the Australian people were told by those opposite the carbon tax had been terminated. Australians were told the government has decided to terminate the carbon tax to help the cost of living pressures for families and to reduce cost of living for costs for small businesses. Those were not the words of the now Prime Minister Tony Abbott. They were the words of the former Labor Prime Minister Kevin Rudd, who went on to say terminating the carbon tax is the fiscally responsible thing to do. Following the election, the truth was abundantly clear. Labor never had any intention to terminate the carbon tax. The will of the Australian people has been blatantly ignored by members opposite. Every member of this parliament, excluding the Greens, was elected on the basis that the carbon tax would be repealed. Why is it that Labor have repeatedly joined forces with the Greens in both the House and the Senate to deny the Australian public what they overwhelmingly voted for? Labor's commitment to repealing the carbon tax is as genuine as their commitment to deliver a budget surplus. Labor have now had 10 months to be true to their word and terminate the carbon tax, but they have failed to be true to their words repeatedly since losing government. Not only have they failed to keep their word, they have also failed to honour the wishes of the Australian people. Members opposite are, without a shadow of a doubt, government change deniers. And as a result of Labor's actions, the carbon tax is still standing. Only 2 weeks ago, the world's largest carbon tax got even bigger, rising from $24.15 to $25.40 per tonne. As a result of Labor's actions, every time ordinary Australians turn on the light, turn on the heater or turn on the toaster, they are paying more. And as a result of Labor's actions, electricity prices across Australia are continuing to unnecessarily rise. Every minute the carbon tax stays in place, it's costing Australians $11 million per day. Since last Thursday's vote in the Senate, Labor's actions have cost Australians $44 million. We are voting to scrap the carbon tax because it is the best way to take financial pressure off families, as well as helping the economy. It will save families, on average, $550 a year. This toxic tax is hurting the households and businesses of Dobell. This is a fact I know because the people of Dobell are telling me daily of the impact the carbon tax has had on their power bills, adding to the cost of living. Repealing Labor's carbon tax will give relief to local businesses, which means more money to invest in local jobs and higher wages. The carbon tax is also impacting on local governments across Australia. And as a result, residents are faced with high rates and more costly utilities such as water and waste removal. Now, last Friday I toured Wyong Shires Council's Buttonderry Waste Management Facility. The Central Coast is rapidly growing, and on an annual basis approximately 250,000 tonnes of waste is received at this facility. There's no alternative for Wyong Shire Council but to operate the waste facility. For the ratepayers of Wyong Shire Council, they're already paying high fees to use this facility, an increase of $22 in the last year alone. And as a result of Labor's carbon tax, in the last financial year, Wyong Shire Council had a carbon tax bill of $5 million. Now, if Labor and the Greens have their way, this bill will continue to increase to over $10 million over the coming years. Now, this is money that could be better spent on new roads, improving existing roads and being invested in much-needed infrastructure and local government services. And as a result of the actions of those opposite, small businesses in Dobell continue to be burdened by the carbon tax. A local smash repair at Wyong has been paying an additional $400 per month for gas. Now, he can't pass this increase on to the end consumer because he's restricted to pricing regulated by insurers. A publican at North Wyong has seen his electricity and gas bills increased by $20,000 per year. Now, the owner wants to employ more people, but he simply can't afford to. This is the harsh reality imposed on local small businesses, including butchers, greengrocers, bakers, smash repairers and restaurateurs across Australia. 75,000 Australian businesses are directly affected by the carbon tax. Now, these are the businesses that employ local people and are the backbone and driving force of many local economies, Dobell included. The Central Coast is expected to grow by an additional 100,000 people by 2031, and this will require more than 45,000 new jobs. Now, this will be achieved by supporting local small businesses and by driving stronger economic growth and increased productivity, not by imposing unnecessary taxes. With Labor's jobs-destroying carbon tax, the difficulty of this task is painfully obvious. Thanks to Labor's carbon tax, there were more small business closures in Dobell than anywhere else in New South Wales. Now, I want to see Dobell known for the highest number of new business start-ups, not for the highest number of business closures. The damage of Labor's carbon tax is clear as day. No matter what the Labor Party says, its actions demonstrate that they are totally committed to a carbon tax. Be it Julia Gillard's $64 billion tax that cost Australian jobs, or Kevin Rudd's $58 billion tax that cost Australians jobs. On the former government's own figures, the carbon tax is set to increase sixfold between now and 2019. The carbon tax explains a lot about Labor's legacy to Australia. 200,000 more people unemployed when they left office as compared to when they took office, and we can't afford to continue as we were. Well, the time has now come for this parliament to put this toxic, job-destroying tax behind us. The time has now come to honour the will of the Australian people and to build a strong and prosperous economy for a safe and secure Australia. The carbon tax is an environmental and economic failure. In its first full year of operation, the carbon tax saw an emissions reduction of 0.1%, despite its $7.6 billion price tag. Over 2 years, the carbon tax has cost Australians $15.4 billion. In addition to domestic emissions under the carbon tax are projected to rise through 2020. The Australian Treasury indicates that by removing the carbon tax now will leave average costs of living across all Australian households around $550 lower than they would be otherwise in 2014-15. It's also estimated that retail electricity should be around 9% lower and retail gas prices around 7% lower than they would otherwise be. And Mr Rod Sims, chair of the ACCC, has stated, "What went up will clearly come down when you take away the carbon tax." The Independent Pricing and Regulatory Tribunal in New South Wales stated gas prices in New South Wales would be up to 9.2% lower without the carbon tax. This means for the 37,000 plus families in Dobell, their average household electricity bills alone will be around $200 lower than they otherwise would be in 2014-15 with Labor's carbon tax. Well, there is a better way. This government is committed to reducing Australia's emissions by 5% by 2020 based on 2000 levels. We will achieve this through our Emissions Reduction Fund. Unlike the carbon tax, it will reduce our emissions by 5% without the damaging cost to business and households as a result of the carbon tax. Its sole focus is to find opportunities to drive emission reductions. The government's Green Army program will see local communities directly benefit from practical, on-the-ground environmental projects. In Dobell, we are proud of our natural environment, from our magnificent beaches and coastline, Tuggerah lakes and our valleys. Our environment contributes to our quality of living. This government is committed to protecting and enhancing our natural environment. In addition to our Green Army projects, we will deliver $3.3 million worth of real improvements to Tuggerah lakes. The people of Dobell know a tax when they see one. They know when people are serious about improving the environment and when people are masquerading a great big new tax in the name of environmentalism. The people of Dobell, along with the people of Australia, voted to scrap the tax. This government was elected with a clear mandate to get rid of the carbon tax. With the carbon tax repealed, Australian households, families, seniors, small businesses and local councils will benefit through lower costs on almost everything throughout our economy. Members now have one last opportunity to be on the right side of history and to scrap this jobs-destroying tax. Labor can keep their word and stand up for households and businesses as they promised to prior to the last election, and we as a parliament can come together and fulfil the desire of the Australian people. The time has come to remove the carbon tax. Mr Deputy Speaker, I commend these bills to the House.
I thank the honourable member for Dobell. The question is that these bills be now read a second time. I call the honourable member for Port Adelaide.
Thank you, Acting Deputy Speaker.